again,
Yes.
not massively dissimilar period. People packed in a kind of shield wall, stabbing with their swords relentlessly through the gaps
Right.
into the enemy line.
Yeah, the use of the stabbing sword rather than the slashing sword. And I guess people would associate kind of Frankish knights as using this massive, great, heavy slashing sword. But at this point, again, they are using the gladius, as the Romans called it, the kind of the stabbing sword. So they approximate to a Roman legion more than to anything else. And of course, Roman legions were dependent on relentless training. And this seems to have been what Charles had given his troops. So, you know, that breathing space that Odo's defeat of the Arabs before the walls of Toulouse had brought Charles, he doesn't seem to have wasted it. He seems to have essentially put his troops through their paces, drilling them and drilling them and drilling them. And even if his men are not as well equipped as the Umayyad forces, they are as well trained. And I think that this is what Charles is relying on to defeat them. So, those are the armies. What about the strategy of the two commanders? So Abdul Rahman's strategy is very plain. He wants to sack the shrine of St. Martin. And there are various reasons why he would be particularly keen to do that. The obvious one is loads of his troops are following him in the expectation of loot. Most of them, I suspect, are not motivated by a passionate commitment to the teachings of the Quran. They want to get as rich as they possibly can.
Of course.
And St. Martin's shrine promises them all kinds of goodies. I think Abdul Rahman recognises the kind of significance to Frankish prestige of the shrine of St. Martin. If he can sack it, you know, it will be a real body blow to the prestige of Shah Martel and his regime. And I think, you know, we've said Abdul Rahman, you know, he comes from the heartlands of Islam. He definitely has a kind of a doctrinal motivation. He wants to strip the shrine of St. Martin bare, not just because it's full of treasure, but because as he sees it, it's full of kind of idols. He wants to humble the pride of the cross worshippers into the dust.
Yeah.
But to do that, to reach the shrine of St. Martin, you know, he's going to have to wipe out the army of the Franks, Charles's army. And the reason for that is that Charles's strategy essentially is to block his access to Tours and force him to attempt a decisive battle. And this for Abdul Rahman is going to be a real challenge, because even though his men are superior in kit and in military technology, the Franks, as we've said, are at least as well trained, and they're also probably numerically superior.
Yeah.
And that's because Charles's forces have been swelled by, you know, the troops that Odo has brought with him from Aquitaine. And of course, you know, they are absolutely resolute in their determination to defend St. Martin's shrine, just as Abdul Rahman wants to strip it because it's so precious to the Franks. Obviously, for that reason, the Franks are determined to defend and protect it. Charles is confident that this is potentially winning strategy because he can rely on his men to hold their ground, not to break, not to flee, but also, should the Arabs be defeated, not to run after them, you know, which would potentially then open them up to attack by the Arab cavalry. So this strategy effectively means the late autumn of 732 that a battle is going to be inevitable. Charles is going to block the road to Tours. Abdul Rahman is going to have to engage him if he wants to break through. And the reason for that, he can't really retreat because that would, you know, be very damaging to his prestige. And also, if he retreats, there's the risk to his baggage train with all that kind of gold and stuff. So effectively, there is no choice but to engage. So there's essentially a kind of week of shadow boxing, and then finally the moment comes. The Arabs are on the Roman road. They see the Franks lined up ahead of them. There is no choice now but to engage in battle. And again, the best account of what happens is this chronicle of 754, and the Christian priest writing that, he describes the Frankish battle line in an incredibly memorable way. The Northerners held their position like a glacier from the frozen north. Amazing description.
Kind of impassable, immovable, indomitable.
Also icy cold, dangerous. He describes how the stabbing swords of the Franks, the Gladi, inflict terrible damage on the invaders, and among the dead is Abdul Rahman himself. So again, the Chronicle of 754. The Austrasians, so that's the Franks, with a terrible strength in their limbs and an iron hand throughout the hard fight, killed him when they found him. And as evening comes, it's clear that the victory is the Franks. But what is perhaps the most impressive witness to their discipline is that they hold their line. I mean, as I said, it's the only way that they could have lost at this point would be if they'd kind of go, whoa, we've won, brilliant, and piled off. They don't. They hold their positions and then they retreat to their camp, pretty confident that the next day they're going to have to fight again, that the battle will continue.
Right.
And I'll describe what then happens and what they find when they wake up the day after this first engagement by quoting the Chronicle of 754. So this priest writes, rising from their sleeping bags at dawn, the Europeans, and it's such an interesting use of that, I think it's the first use of that phrase in any medieval chronicle. The Europeans beheld the tents and camps of the Arabs' canopies located and ordered as they had been, not knowing that they were all empty, and supposing that the Saracens' phalanxes were prepared for battle within. They sent scouts and found that all the Ishmaelites' columns had escaped, so that's the Arab columns, and that all of them were secretly fleeing home, passing the night in tight formation. The Europeans were anxious lest they might have concealed themselves on a hidden path as a stratagem. Stunned in every way, they hunted the surrounding area in vain. Making no further effort to find the aforesaid people, they returned to their own countries, rejoicing with their booty and the evenly divided spoils.
So that's it. The invaders, the raiders, have been beaten off, and they've vanished with their stuff because they don't want to lose their or plunder their.
I think they leave some of it behind, and this is what the Franks pick up.
Yeah.
But the Franks don't pursue them. I mean, that's what's striking. They let them go.
Right.
And it's indisputably, for